Hey, how's it going? So 2023 has been a bit of an exceptional year for games, hasn't it? From indie to AAA, there's been a ridiculous amount of high quality stuff coming out pretty much all year long. I'm not sure what's going on. In this video, I'm looking at Cocoon, which is one of the smaller, shorter games of the year, but due to a few key reasons, one I personally consider to be up there with the best. Right then, let's get into it. So Cocoon was developed by Geometric Interactive, who are a small independent studio founded by two former Playdead employees. This is significant because Playdead are best known for Inside and Limbo, two games that masterfully combined gameplay, visuals and sound to create incredibly atmospheric and memorable experiences. The two developers who founded the studio are Jeppe Carlsen and Jakob Schmid. Jeppe was the lead gameplay designer on both Inside and Limbo, and Jakob was one of the composers who worked on Inside's music and sound. Cocoon is a bit of a different beast to their previous work, but I found that it shared a lot of similarities to them, and while an entire team of talented developers worked hard on it to make it what it is, I think it's fair to say that with these two at the helm, it was in very good hands from the start. So what's this game all about? Well, it's a 3D puzzle adventure that's played from a top-down perspective where you control a robotic insect and explore a collection of diverse worlds. Its most defining feature is its world leaping mechanic. Basically, each world in the game is contained inside of an orb that you're able to jump in and out of at any time. Not only is this an inspired idea to form a game around, it's also incredibly cool to use, and I'll go into this more in a minute. In terms of its story, it's apparently about unraveling a cosmic mystery, and I say that because I didn't know what the hell was going on for most of the game. I mean, I even had to get this little bit of a synopsis from the game's store description, as that's about all it gives you. It never explains anything that's happening, and it mostly comes down to your own interpretation to decide what it all means. I don't mind this style of storytelling, but I know not everyone does, so I did want to mention it. Fortunately, this isn't the game's primary focus, so I don't really see it being a problem for most players anyway. What I did understand though was that many of the things that happen in this game are amazing to witness, with the gameplay, sound and visual design all coming together to create some truly spectacular sequences. And speaking of the visuals, the graphics are fantastic with an art style that really pops. Lighting and shadows are used effectively to create striking scenes, and each world has its own colour palette which helps to give them a unique look and feel. They also have distinct landscapes to discover, such as canyons, swamps and whatever the hell this place is. These contrasting colours and locations serve to keep the game interesting as you consistently jump in between each of them. There's great attention to detail too. You can see insects scurrying about, plants swaying in the breeze and the more alien looking creatures going about the business, and all this helps to bring each place to life. And while each world is different from the other, one thing they have in common is this weird merging of organic and inorganic matter. Many things in the game have this mixed up biomechanical thing going on, and it results in some properly bizarre looking stuff. And what perfectly complements these visuals is the game's outstanding audio. Seriously, the sound design in Cocoon is amazing and plays a big role in immersing you into its various worlds. Everything from the footsteps of the robotic insect to the groans of otherworldly creatures and long dormant machinery coming back to life, it all sounds incredible, and there's obviously been a huge amount of care put into each layer of the game's soundscapes. Its music is also well done, with atmospheric and moody sounding synths that play as you explore, which help to give the game additional layers of mystery and intrigue. Then, when a more significant event is taking place, the whole soundtrack moves up a gear, further enhancing what's happening and making it feel even more epic. Which brings me to the gameplay. As I've mentioned, Cocoon is all about leaping in and out of different worlds to solve a variety of puzzles. This world leaping mechanic reminded me a bit of Portal in a way, where that game had the player moving themselves and objects through space and time at various speeds and trajectories. Cocoon is the player moving themselves through space and time, but into entirely different worlds. There's no
speedy thing goes in, speedy thing comes out
in Cocoon, but I found the things it did with its mechanics were just as mind-bending as many of Portal's puzzles were, especially when you factor in being able to carry around each world and bring them inside of one another. The possibilities start to get pretty crazy. The worlds need to be brought in and out of each other because they each have a variety of different functions. For example, one of their uses is that they act as a kind of power source for various devices and machines. There are lifts, bridges, and all kinds of contraptions that require a world in order to be activated. Sometimes these devices can be just out of reach, with the world not being able to fit through part of the environment. This then becomes its own puzzle, with you figuring out how to get it to where it needs to be. They also have their own special abilities, so say you're carrying the orange world in a specific place, it will then reveal these hidden bridges which will let you proceed further than you could before. More abilities are introduced as the game goes on, and some of the later ones are surprising and help to change up the gameplay in many interesting ways. Beyond just messing around with all the worlds, there are also other types of puzzles to sort out. At certain points you'll come across these symbols that you can interact with. For these you need to investigate the surrounding area to find the correct sequence in which to activate them. Once you've done that, a drone is released, which then needs to be escorted to specific gates that it's able to unlock for you. The problem with these though is that there are often defensive barriers in place that capture the drones as they try to pass through them, which is something else you need to figure out. Another element you need to contend with are the bosses of each world. Now, the fact that Cocoon had boss fights surprised me a bit because it has no real combat mechanics, yet regardless of this, it still manages to implement them in interesting and compelling ways. Instead of a traditional fight, they instead act as their own self-contained puzzle where you need to figure out how to avoid and damage them while using a newly introduced mechanic. And while I didn't find any of them especially difficult, I appreciated the change of pace from a puzzle perspective and the different type of challenge that they offered. And just from an audio and visual standpoint, they are all well impressive. Have a listen to how the music changes here based on what the boss is doing. It's great stuff. That note on the bosses not being very difficult leads me into the thing that I think makes Cocoon truly special, which is how elegantly designed every part of it is. So a couple of hours into playing the game, I realised that I'd never really become lost or stuck on anything. I wondered why that was, as I'd been jumping in and out of different worlds, solving various puzzles and fighting bosses. How had this not devolved into a confusing recursive nightmare of me getting lost in these worlds within worlds? Well, as it turns out, Cocoon goes to great lengths to ensure each of its challenges are balanced and that you're always kept on the right track. And it achieves this by using a variety of clever and unintrusive design methods that are implemented in ways that won't be noticeable for most players. Take for example the controls. So the game has exactly two inputs. You move with one analog stick and you interact with one other button. What this simplistic control scheme results in is a game that feels exceptionally streamlined and intuitive to play. This is because, in a way, the controls influence every other part of the game design, since it's all built around the way you move and interact with it. You'll be setting up sequences of events that ripple across worlds, and it looks complex and like it might get out of hand, but it never really does. It's kept deceptively simple due to the limited number of inputs that you have at any one time. Due to this, nothing is ever overly difficult. It's unlikely that you'll ever get stuck on anything, and if you do, it won't be for a huge amount of time. That's because each puzzle has been designed in a way that makes them enjoyable to figure out, fun to complete, and you feel clever while you're doing it. There's a learning curve here that eases you into each new concept before pushing them further. On top of this, there's a delicate balance being struck where nothing is a complete cakewalk, but you're also never frustrated, and it's kind of amazing how the game manages to consistently pull this off as it layers on various new mechanics, puzzle types, and additional worlds. Something else that's happening is that you're being blocked off from previous places you've been to. The game didn't appear linear to me, there's no loading screens and everything is seamlessly interconnected. The way it creates this illusion is by restricting the places you're allowed to go. It uses gates, one-way lifts and other less obvious things to cleverly block you off, usually after you've solved a certain puzzle or triggered a specific event. What this ends up doing is it stops you from wasting time in a place you no longer need to be in, while also preventing you from getting lost. And in a game about progressing through multiple worlds at the same time, it makes a lot of sense why it's doing this. Conversely, you're always being pushed forwards in clever ways too. There's no HUD, waypoints or maps in Cocoon, yet you'll always find the right way to go. One way it achieves this is through smart environmental design that nudges you in the right direction, puzzles tend to flow from one area to the next, and even when they are spread out across multiple worlds, it will always be made clear in some way. There are also lots of little details that help with this as well. Those drones I mentioned before have lights on them that point the way to the next gate, and there are even little musical cues that play after you've solved part of a puzzle, letting you know you're on the right track. I even saw a tweet from Jeppe where he said that you're always able to see most of what you need right after initially jumping into a world. It's seriously impressive how deep this stuff goes, and it's no wonder the game took around 6.5 years to develop, because it really does make all this stuff appear effortless, which is no easy thing to do. With all that said, I really enjoyed Cocoon. It's one that I'd been really looking forward to since I first saw its reveal trailer, and it exceeded pretty much all of my expectations. Its design is amazing, and all the work they put into creating a frictionless and intuitive gameplay experience paid off in a huge way, which ended up leading to a game that's satisfying to play, well paced, and pushes each of its mechanics as far as they need to go without ever becoming overwhelming or tedious. And I don't really have any negatives to say about it, to be honest. Maybe 4 to 5 hours is too short, its perceived lack of difficulty might be a problem for some, and the story being so abstract might not be for everyone, but for me, to have a game be this engaging from start to finish with so many cool and inventive sequences to play through, all taking place seamlessly across many different worlds, it's more than worth the price of admission. And oh yeah, it's also on Game Pass, so you can check it out there too if you wanna. Which brings me to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and more than that, I hope it gave you an idea of what's good about Cocoon and why it's worth checking out. Are you gonna play it, or have you already? Let me know in the comments below. The channel has recently hit 100 subscribers, and I really appreciate you all being here while I figure this thing out. So thanks for watching, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Cheers.